better things go flow from post to post as it's supposed to be normally.
Oluna, you're my guy. Now you guy. So now I guy. Yeah, family is there for so what?
Vote Olumide Osaigbon.
With events of the past days and warnings of a threat to Nigeria's democracy, the federal government says sponsors of protests are on the watch list and accounts have been frozen. And the nation continues to count the loss in the destruction of properties in private and public infrastructure and facilities in the wake of the past days of protests. We assess tonight the issues raised and the response of government on the agitations of the protesters. Hello everyone, welcome to the program. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Wakimaloye here in Abuja. Let's begin by letting you know what the plans of the federal government are. It does look to me that they have, of course, already their eyes set on some of those who are involved actively or passively in the past protests that we've seen in the past few days. And so they've said those who are sponsors of the mayhem, they have their eyes on them. The Nigerian Immigration Service, the NIS, plays the sponsors of the mayhem and the fallout of the protest that greeted the streets of Nigeria. In most part, has now been placed on watch list. The Immigration Comptroller General Kemi Nandap today in Abuja during a briefing by security heads says that the sponsors of the destruction have been identified. The protest assumed violent dimensions in some states, leading to destruction and looting. Take a listen to her.
None of us here is happy to hear any Nigerians.
Some of these people who are actually in diaspora, we have a number of them who are actually instigating this mayhem that we're seeing right now. What we've done is we've had them on our watch list and they've been watch listed. We have them on our radars and we're making sure that any attempt they make to come into the country will notify the necessary authorities.
All right. That is a word from the Immigration Service. It means that some of these people are not on Nigerian soil. And the federal government says they've traced these people and they have their eyes on them. Meanwhile, the governor of Kaduna State, Senator Ubasani, has inspected some facilities vandalized by hoodlums during yesterday's nationwide End Bad Governance protest in the state metropolis. The governor was accompanied by top heads of security agencies and the Deputy Inspector General of Police inspected a branch of one of the vandalized banks at Tundunwada in Kaduna South local government area, where he described the violent protest as politically motivated and aimed at destabilizing the present administration. And of course,
when you see what happened, particularly when you see young children between the ages of even 9, 10, 11, and even 14, now raising the flag up.
Governor of Kaduna State there. So we look at a lot of issues tonight. Human rights lawyer Femi Falana has been ringing it that the threat to Nigeria's democracy is unacceptable. The federal government and security agencies are also ringing it. We cannot collapse our democracy based on the agitations of the Nigerian people. But then, how did the events of the past day go? So we assess tonight Plus the fact that it was also one person who wrote yesterday and said, look, eyes must now be set on the state government and the governors on how the resources available to them in the past 1 year, especially some monies that are specifically assigned to reduce poverty rate in the country, how have they been spent by these states, where a lot of people will go to the street and clamor for end up bad governance. Our attention is being on the central government. He does look at the federal government. He's here and knows that they can no longer take the Nigerian people for a ride, and perhaps now they are on their toes. But what about the government in the state? He does look like they are cooling off in their AC chilled room and not seem to be bothered about what exactly is going on, which in any case, they have much of the powers, because these protests are happening in the state. Mr. Falana will be joining me, but of course we'll be hearing from another person who has a very strong view when it comes to protest in Nigeria. He's been part of it. He's been on the street. He's been in government. We'll be hearing this perspective tonight. Stick around with me, everyone. But first, let's check out some of your political roundup stories.
The Lagos High Court has extended its earlier order restricting protesters of the #EndBadGovernance in the state to the Gani Faremi Freedom Park in Ojota and the Peace Park in Ketu. The extension order became necessary after the state complied with the pre-action protocols for preemptive remedies ordered last week by Vacation Judge Justice Emmanuel Ogundare. Justice Sherifat Sonaike, who takes over as Vacation Judge, gave the order today after hearing an application filed by the Lagos State Attorney General and Commissioner of Justice, Lagos State, Mr. Lawal Pedro, SAN. The order is expected to remain in force until August 29, when the case is expected to come up again before the court. Governor Mai Malabuni of Yobe State has asked local government council chairmen and traditional institutions in the state to ensure residents across the state are fully informed about government policies, as well as carried along in program implementation. The State Commissioner for Home Affairs, Information and Culture, Mr. Abdullahi Bego, disclosed this while briefing journalists on the outcome of the governor's meeting with local government chairmen, stakeholders, and the 14 emirs in the state at Government House, Damaturu. The meeting emphasized the need for local government and traditional councils to attend to local and community issues in a way that strengthens trust, good neighborliness, and community cohesion. In other news, a group of civil society organizations in Edo State are calling on the police in Edo State to expedite action in investigation and arrest of those involved in the violence in Benin that led to the death of a supporter of the People's Democratic Party. At a news conference in Abuja, the national coordinator of the group, Mr. Victor Kalu, condemned the political crisis in some parts of the state, accusing some selfish politicians of sponsoring the violence. To Rivers State, where the All Progressives Congress is accusing Governor Similayi Fubara of plotting to make Port Harcourt the epicenter of the #EndBadGovernance protests in the country. At a news conference in Port Harcourt, the chairman of the State Caretaker Committee, Mr. Tonio Kocha, accused some elements within the state government of sponsoring hoodlums to destroy the secretariat of the APC. He then called on security agencies to secure the APC facility and prevent any further damage to the building. Meanwhile, the Rivers State government has denied the allegations by the All Progressives Congress of sponsoring protesters to vandalize a billboard at the state office of the party in Port Harcourt. Commissioner for Information in the state, Mr. Joe Johnson, told Channels Television in a telephone interview that the allegation by the Caretaker Committee chairman of the APC, Mr. Tonio Kocha, is baseless. Lastly, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, today published the finalized figures for newly registered voters ahead of the upcoming Edo and Ondo state governorship elections. The final count revealed that Edo State has 119,206 new voters, while Ondo State has 58,708 new voters.
Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Now you've been up to speed. Now, the Nigeria Service Chiefs and the Inspector General of Police have now vowed to resist any unlawful change of government amid the End Bad Governance protests rocking the nation. Take a listen to what they said when they gathered today in Abuja.
None of us here is happy to hear any Nigerian is injured for whatever reason. It's our duty to protect Nigerians. The only people we're after are those ones that don't mean us well, the enemies of the state. And anyone who makes himself an enemy of the state then will be ready to face the law.
The Nigerian army stand assured in defense of our democracy, of our peace, of our harmony, and we are not going to shift ground on that.
We still have in few states, in Kano, Kaduna, Katsina, and Bauchi State, group of people who started campaign, subversive campaign, waving flags of other countries and openly calling for military takeover of government. This is not a protest, but an offense of treason.
All right, you heard them. They spoke today in reaction to some of the things that we saw. Today, Mr. Femi Falana, a senior lawyer, said there is no place to the threat to our democracy. Yesterday, he said that we need to focus on those monies being spent or being released at the federal level to this federative unit, to especially to alleviate the poverty in the land. Let's speak to him now. He joins us live from Ikeja in Lagos. Thank you so much, Mr. Falana, for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Sure.
Yeah. Let me get, just briefly, I'd like to get your assessment, because it does look like things escalated quickly and badly in the second or third day of the protest, considering how we were now talking about moving from the conversation on the agitations, the demands of the protesters, now to the issues of mutiny, issues of treason, issues of subversion of our democracy. Did you ever envisage that things are going to go in this direction? And now we are even now having to discuss how there could be some kind of international dimension to a possible subversion of the instituted authority in the nation?
Well, I never thought in my widest imagination that what started as a peaceful protest will snowball into a campaign by some elements for an unconstitutional change of government. Whichever way you look at it, it is totally unacceptable because for almost 3 decades, Nigerians went through a horrendous experience to chase the military out of power in Nigeria. We were also involved, some of us were also involved in the struggle for the democratization, as it were, of a number of African countries. We were involved in the struggle against apartheid, in the struggle against colonialism in the Southern African region. And currently, I'm personally involved in the campaign against the colonization of Western Sahara by Morocco. So to that extent, we cannot fold our arms and allow undemocratic forces to undermine the democratic process. Yes, we are bound to have peaceful protest. We are bound to disagree with those who are in power. We are bound to condemn the denial of the dividends of democracy to our people. But peaceful protest should not be allowed to degenerate to a situation whereby forces of repression would take advantage to begin to demand for an unconstitutional change of government or campaigning for military rule in one form or the other. Well, again, I can understand what is going on. For me, it's born out of the tragedy of the not teaching history in our schools by government. We've had uninterrupted civil rule for 25 years. So you can imagine that those who are 40 years now were probably 15 when the military was forced out of power. So for those who are under 40 in Nigeria, a majority are, they have not been told, they have not been taught in any school what Nigerians went through under all manners of military dictators. Ditto for the Civil War, because the history of the Civil War has not been taught in our schools. Many young people are calling for a war in many parts of the country. So I think a lot of lessons should be drawn from this experience. Again, last year, after the elections, there were people who openly called for a military coup in Abuja. Since nothing happened to them, others now feel that it's a normal call once there is a disagreement either with the government of the day or with other forces in the country. But we must not allow enemies of democracy to derail the democratic process. But it's also a challenge to those who are in power at the federal, state, and local governments to take this as a wake-up call that for Nigerians, it can never be the same again, by seriously addressing the crisis of poverty, of injustice, illegal arrest and detention without trial. Because when you listen to some of the demands, you will discover that a lot of these issues a lot of the problems could have been resolved by the government. And when I talk of the government, I do not mean the federal government alone. And that is why I have demanded, and my organization has demanded, that we take the issue of accountability very seriously at all levels of government in Nigeria. And for the elite, our job is cut out for us by this experience. Never again are we going to allow children, 18.5 million children, never again should we allow them out of school, because that is the figure by UNICEF. And over 60% of that figure can be located in the north. So there are young people, there are children who are permanently on the street. So when there is any little gathering of people, any form of gathering of people, they are bound to join. And when it is a protest for young people and for others who are hungry, who have not eaten for days, they think it's an opportunity to join the looting culture in the country. And when I talk of looting culture, I'm talking of looting, grand looting, by members of the ruling class, those who are facing trial for looting the treasury to the tune of 109 billion, or somebody a man who is on the run, who is being charged by the EFCC for looting a small state to the tune of 80 billion naira. So when people read about this, young people read about this, they are also instigated to want to take advantage of a protest to either loot warehouses and the rest of them. Of course, that is not justifying, looting by any group of people. But the language must now change. And I've been discussing with my colleagues. The bourgeois language of the law must change. When you are talking of looting, it must not apply to only those who are helping themselves. When you have a protest, we must, in fact, now go all out. Go all out to the few people, an infinitesimal minority of politicians looting the treasury, to the extent that you have your people on the street. Your people cannot have 1 meal a day, to the extent that our roads are bad, to the extent that people are dying on the roads. So I believe that we must look at this crisis in all ramifications, not only from the point of view of law and order. The social implications of the crisis on ground must be examined. Again, as I said, we are not going to have solutions to our problems by embracing military rule, having regards to the colossal damage done to the progress of our country, the underdevelopment of our country that is traceable to all manners of military dictators. And that is why we must go all out and ensure that no group of Nigerians will find military rule attractive.
Mr. Falana, if I may jump in quickly. Now, you look at what is being said, and I'll come in a bit to the issues of the roles of the governors, the roles of the local government chairman, and the traditional institutions in governance. Because all of these come together in the direction of the manner in which our people are being governed. So I look at it, the DSS is talking, the immigration is talking, and in the identification of those who are said to have been fingered in sponsoring the mayhem, the dimension of the Russian flags that we're seeing. And we've been having this conversation in the last 2 days. And our role here as a media is to also point out what we see as a possible threat to our democracy and whatever that is strange in our land. We see the dimension in which the protests have gone in the northern region of the country, where we've seen more damage and more destruction on the street, to the point that people are so daring, they took over the armored vehicle of the police and were driving it around. We see people literally removing the bricks on the road and unleashing mayhem on infrastructure of private banks and, in fact, public property. I mean, what could have led to this? What do you figure could have brought this international dimension where we now see foreign flags being flown in our country?
Well, we are products of our environment. The Russian flag being hosted or being taken around can be traced to the crisis in Niger Republic. As far as many of these guys are concerned, and I'm talking of the conscious elements that introduce this dangerous dimension to the protest, I think what they are trying to achieve is to say, whereas Nigeria led ECOWAS to threaten the government and the military government in Niger, this time around, we are supporting the military government in Niger, in Burkina Faso, in Mali. And therefore, since Russia is the main backer of these military regimes, we also want a situation. I mean, we are supporting Russia, and we are taking advantage of this, because if you also listen to the campaign, they are calling for outright military rule in our country, a very dangerous call. And so that explains that. But again, the Russian government through the embassy in Nigeria said, we have nothing to do with the protests in Nigeria. But I'm saying that a few elements took advantage of the protests to introduce the Russian flag, to make their point and to support their call for a military dictatorship, a return of the military in our country. And I'm saying that that will have to be resisted by Nigerians, in as much as Nigerians have the right to protest. Peaceful protests must not be allowed to be hijacked by any group of people to demand a return of military rule in our country. It's not going to move us forward. In fact, it's going to take the country more than 40 years back. And that has been our experience. And the experience of some of the countries where people are embracing military rule.
Now, yesterday, Mr. Falana, you spoke about monies that have been disbursed to the federating unit. And you raised a very big flag on the fact that, which pointed to the fact that yesterday, at the end of our conversation, we were asking the question, state governors, state government, local government, where is our money? Show the money. Let us see where these monies are. And you have said it, that more money has been, and in the next few minutes, we're going to show to the effect that almost double of federal allocation has been disbursed to the states in the last 1 year. For example, in April of 2023, the 3 tiers of government shared 872 billion naira. In May of 2023, the 3 tiers shared 786 billion naira. June 2023, the 3 tiers, they shared 907 billion naira. In July, 966 billion naira. That's what they share. Compared, Mr. Falana, to January of this year, 1.14 trillion. February of this year, 1.2 trillion. March 2024, 1.12 trillion. April 2024, 1.08 trillion. For example, Zamfara State, in the monies announced by the Budget Ministry to be disbursed to fight poverty, about 20-something billion alone will go to Zamfara State. And so the question would be, what are these monies used for?
Well, Sean, it is important to recognize that the removal of fuel subsidy last year, as I did point out in a lecture in Lagos last year, had enriched the 3 tiers of government in the country: the federal government, the local government, and state government. And your figures are not even quite up to date. In June last year, yes, 900 billion naira was shared. But actually what came to the coffers then was 1.9 trillion. The 3 tiers of government, or the 2 tiers, state and federal government, decided to keep 1 trillion naira. In December, it was 1.7 trillion naira. That month, on December 3 last year, the federal government disbursed 135.4 billion naira to state governments to fight poverty. Again, this money, this fund was coming from the $750 million loan taken from the World Bank to fight poverty by the state government in July, about 2 weeks ago. The federal government did another disbursement of 438.3 billion naira. Under the Buhari administration, between 2022 and 2023, about 112 billion naira from the same fund was disbursed. And my position is that in the states, in all the states of the Federation, it is difficult to locate programs that are designed to confront poverty. But I must say this time around, Anambra State and Kaduna State did not partake of the 438 billion because the agency in charge of disbursing the money did say that they were still expecting the reports from the 2 states of previous disbursement. So we're talking of 34 states and the Federal Capital Territory haven't received 438 billion to fight poverty. Why I issue a statement on this is that whereas in December, when I pointed out that 135 billion naira had been given out as part of post-COVID-19 program, This money I've been giving to the state. I was abused by one of the presidential aides. I think one Tope Ajayi came out to lambast me that I was exaggerating the figure. Now, happily, the federal government has now been compelled to say the total sum of 570 billion naira had gone to the states in the last 9 months or thereabout. In other words, the 135 billion naira and the 438 billion naira, totaling 573 billion naira. So if you have that kind of money in our country, and I'm challenging the elite, I'm challenging our people, traditional institutions, youth organizations, women groups, and the rest of them, to go to each of the states and demand from the governments what projects are going to be carried out from this fund.
Mr. Falano,
and I'm also
Mr. Falano, let me come in quickly.
Yeah, no, just one point.
Yeah, let me
point.
Yeah.
I'm also pleading with Nigerians to ask the legislators, those who took 500 million naira in Abuja, the Senate president that took 4 billion naira for constituency projects. This is the time to ask what these projects are about. We must ask each of the legislators in Abuja so that we can begin to take accountability seriously. And beyond the protest, we must now go back to the drawing table to demand for accountability.
Yeah, what I wanted to point out, because of our time quickly, Mr. Falano, is that the $750 million that was published in the newspapers, disbursed to the states as reimbursement to states and the FCT, which it was supposed to be COVID-19 Action Recovery and Economic Stimulus Program. That money, Mr. Falano, is a credit. And what happens in a credit is that it's a World Bank supported credit. Either one way or the other, you will pay it back. Now, for example, Mr. Falano, Zamfara said we will receive over 49 billion. Nasarawa said we will receive over 27 billion. Plateau said over 26 billion. Gombe said over 25 billion. Kebbi said 21 billion. Cross River, 20 billion. Rivers, 19 billion. Niger, 17 billion. Mr. Falano, this is the purpose of this money. It's a program for result intervention where states and FCT invest their resources, produce results in line with agreed protocols, and get reimbursed by the federal government after independent verification exercise for grants for poor and vulnerable household and for food security services. That is the purpose of that money. And yesterday when we told our viewers, the hashtag where is our money needs to start now. It's a serious matter, isn't it?
Now, those projects must be published, for which reimbursement is being claimed in Abuja. If you are saying that a state like Zamfara has spent 21 billion naira on fighting poverty, we want to see the evidence. Because Nigerians are going to pay back the loan. And that is why it is the business of everybody to demand accountability. And that is not to talk about the monthly statutory allocations that have improved, that has increased. So the monthly statutory allocation of each tier of government, federal, state, and local government. Again, Nigerians must demand explanation. We must also demand explanation from legislators, state and federal, that are also collecting money for constituency projects, so that these projects can be located in the constituencies in the interest of our people. And that is how you can prevent it, by fighting poverty, by creating jobs, that you can begin to address the problem that drive people to the street.
All right. Mr. Falano, we need to close this conversation in 30 seconds. Has there been a big lesson learned on everyone's side? Because the protesters must also have learned a lesson when the federal government says, look, there might be a possible hijack. On the side of the security agencies, definitely lessons must have been learned. On the part of the federal government, lessons also learned. But we also as citizens must now learn that, look, this country is not about the federal government alone. It's about also everyone that is involved in the whole gamut of governance in Nigeria. In 30 seconds, how do you summarize the lessons learned across board?
The president has said, President Bola Tinubu has rightly said that he appreciates the problems, the crisis, the hardship that drove people to the street. And I think that is very fundamental. Secondly, the question of fuel subsidy, which the government says we cannot remove. But the government has just announced, that 450,000 barrels of crude oil will be given to the Dangote refinery every day. And the refinery will be asked to pay in Naira. The government must now sit down with the company. What is the implication of this opportunity be given to you with respect to the pump price of petroleum products in our country? Secondly, the NNPCL has announced that the Port Harcourt refinery, 2 of them, will come on board, will commence operations again in August, while Warri and Kaduna will commence operations in December. And this will mean that not less than 1.2 million barrels of crude oil will be refined in Nigeria daily.
All right.
And this government should be advised to ensure that those dates are not shifted again. And once you can do that, the crisis of importing fuel will be over. And then there will be more money.
All right.
In terms of the money being wasted now,
all right,
billions of dollars to import fuel will be saved for development.
Mr. Falana, thank you so much, as always, for your time and the resources in terms of knowledge and depth of conversation that we have on this issue. Thank you so much for our country to be better for it. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
We'll take a break, and when we return, one man that has slept in jail and in prison in the military era fighting for our democracy will be joining him. He's been in government too, but he has perspective on how both sides of the divide play out, especially at a time like this in our country. I'll be joined later on in the program in the next 1 minute or so by Senator Shehu Sani, former federal lawmaker and a rights activist. We'll be back, everyone. Join us again. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Let's now speak with Senator Shehu Sani, a former federal lawmaker and a retired rights activist. Thank you so much, Senator Sani, for joining us. It looks like some of you and your colleagues have retired from protesting on the street. You didn't particularly join them in this one. Was there a reason why you did not?
Shehu, thank you for having me in your program. Well, first and foremost, we have not retired from activism. And I believe and strongly support those who protested peacefully. Nigeria is a democracy, and everyone has the right to peacefully object, to resist, to disobey, and also to stand for any ideals. And democracy and the laws of our land give you that leverage to do that. But what we have seen in the last few days, it's not a peaceful protest as far as I'm concerned from the northern part of Nigeria. The whole idea was hijacked and the script was changed as far as the north was concerned. Those who called for the protest must have come from Lagos or anywhere, but there were no visible leadership as far as Kano, Jigawa, Kaduna, and all the states that experience violence in the north. It's a fact. Even protest has a rule. The first rule is that there should be a reason for which people should protest. Of course, there is hunger, there is hardship, there is suffering as a result of the economic reforms program, which is enough reason for people to protest, but to protest peacefully. But secondly, a protest also needs leadership. When you have leaders who will lead the flock on the street, then certainly one of the responsibility of that leader is to control the crowd and to guide them. We're going to start protests from point A to point B, and we're going to start from 8 a.m. and end by 4 p.m. Now, that was not the case in the north. So from what we have seen, especially in Kaduna State, where I come from, was that people were called out to the street, and then they were left on autopilot. And now young people use the opportunity to launch attack on public infrastructure, snatch motorcycles and phones, molest people, attack banks, and looted public establishments. And then the new dimension to this is what you have just discussed, was that a day before the last protest, money was shared to youths, and then Russian flags was also shared. That shows that the whole intent of the protest is not simply about the policies and programs of the government or objection to removal of subsidy, but there was an attempt to create an atmosphere where there will be an overthrow of the government. And when you have this kind of situation, you will see that there is someone writing a script for anarchy, lawlessness, and disorder. And it is incumbent on people like us to speak. I cannot join a protest that I was not engaged or consulted in the planning stage. And I believe that no one should. If those who believe that the solution to the problem, or there is a need for people to protest, then there should have been consultations. This is not the first time we have protests in Nigeria. And you have seen protests by Labour, protests by ASU, protests by NANS. But protest has a rule. You embark on a day or two protest, and then you suspend it and create room for dialogue. There you table your demands, and negotiations take place, and then you achieve some of the objectives and aims of your own protest. But that was not the case here.
Senator, I'd like you to give us a sense, a comparative analysis, how the protests have developed in different dimensions in different parts of the country. It does look like that protest split the country into half, where we saw a different dimension up north and a different dimension down south.
Yeah, one of the fundamental differences between the protests that took place in the north and the ones in the south is that the ones in the south has identifiable leaders. You can say this person now comes on and say, we are organizing a protest tomorrow, and we're going to, this will be our meeting point, and this is where we're going. But in the whole north, nobody can pinpoint to you specifically who is responsible for the protests in Kaduna, in Jigawa, in Borno, in Kano State. So absence of leadership is one. And when you don't have leaders of protest leading a protest, then you simply have anarchy. How does a peaceful protest metamorphose into a violent one? There are 6 factors to it. The first has to do with perhaps the use of live bullets against peaceful protesters. The second has to do with infiltration of the protesters by thugs. Because thugs sometimes thugs don't need to be sponsored. They take advantage of such procession and then they loot. The third aspect of it has to do with the fact that if there are people with ulterior motives other than the one that were publicly advertised, you have violence. The fourth aspect of it is that when protests are sponsored, then it is not simply, it's not an organic procession, it's not an organic process that came from the people. It was designed to create disorder and anarchy in the land. The fourth aspect of it has to do with the fact that when you unleash thugs against peaceful protesters, then you will have violence. In our case here, the symptoms of anarchy and disorder was clear with what you have seen with the flags being displayed. When young people were called out to the street and they don't have anyone to guide them, then they guide themselves. And when mob rules, this is what we have.
But would you say that the protest in some way was politically motivated or sponsored? You said earlier that people were being given money.
Yes.
In the north.
Yes.
But that doesn't look like the case in the south. So I'm looking at a dimension that looks like there is an ethnic difference or regional differences in the manner in which those two the scenarios went. And I'll give you three characteristics that differentiated the northern protest and the southern protest. In the north, you saw a quick escalation of violence, such that it came to a point that, in fact, security operatives were now trying to find a way of quelling those violence. Secondly, which you will not see as much of that in the southern part of the country. Secondly, quickly, governors and in about 5 to 7 states declared curfew in some of the northern states. The third is that there are now international dimension into what happened and what we saw in the northern region of the country. How come there is a protest that was announced, but we saw something different in different parts of the country? And there are those who will say, if there are political dimension to it, to what end?
Well, I am happy that you have already been able to identify some of the differences. But I can tell you that the major difference between the southern and northern protests is that people in the north were simply told to come out to protest without leadership coordination to tell them this is what to do. And this is how it ended up.
And those who asked them to come out, yes, they did not come out with them.
They didn't come out with them.
It was a remote and a virtual ordering or control of these people, isn't it?
Yeah. You see, the economic situation in the country has created an atmosphere where people are angry and they are looking for a way to which they can register their anger publicly. And now an opportunity came, but that opportunity was the one that has a hidden motive. There are ulterior motives attached to it. And then they came out to the street. I can tell you many of these young boys who were holding these Russian flags don't know even what that flag was all about. If you are going out for a hunger protest, you should be creative. You can pick up plates, you can pick up spoons and empty pots, or raise Nigerian flag. We have seen economic protests in Brazil, in Argentina, and in some countries in Southeast Asia, where you see this kind of creativity. But in the case of the North, there was a deliberate attempt not to achieve the aim of pressurizing government to change its policy, but to overthrow the whole government, using people who are not sure and don't know they were being used. And this is what we are led to. Before a protest, naturally, there will be a press conference. The leadership of that protest will go and organize a press conference and say, tomorrow, on so-so date, we are going to have a protest. And we urge on the security to provide all the necessary protection and support that they are supposed to by the provisions of our Constitution. But that was not the case. And the violence you see in the North is a bottle of anger, and anger that has generated for decades, and now an opportunity came. And there is a message to this, and there is a lesson to learn from this. The millions of young people in northern Nigeria today who have demonstrated by the use of violence that they can go against anything and anyone, a time bomb, not just for the North, but for the whole country. The earlier we do something about endemic poverty and destitution in the North, the better for the country.
And I'm going to ask quickly, because I like you to, because I know you are an advocate of good governance, and you've spoken and picked holes in the manner in which the federating units are being governed. But I like, as a leader of thought in the northern region of the country, I like you to mention, I'm a student of history, and I know the struggle of how our country fought, and those major figures fought to take the reins of power from the boys in khaki. And the fact that at the end of the day, you look at those who have laid their lives down and some of the consequences of ethnic politics and poisoning the minds of young people to raise ethnic tension in our land. What does this portend, especially what we saw, knowing the political intricacy in our country today? There are those who will say You've had a northerner govern this country for 80 years. And you have now a southerner who has just got into office just for about a year. But that was not the essence of the protest in the first place. But those who have now caused this mayhem have now raised all of this tension to now make political permutation into what could have been a threat to a legitimate government in power. What does this portend? Should the leaders of the North start rethinking strategies of how we need to keep our nation and the unity of this nation intact?
Well, Mr. Sheon, what I can tell you is that from what I know, if the actions taken by the governor of Kaduna State and government of Kaduna State has not been deep, this country will have been in flames up to this very moment. But consultations were made because Kaduna was the target of these plotters, of this anarchy. Now, it's important as a region, we should not simply use a telescope. We should use a mirror to look at ourselves. Quite rightly, we must hold President Tinubu to account as an elected leader and the president of this country. But the fact remains that he is not the problem and he is also not the solution to the issues we face in northern Nigeria. The poverty, the illiteracy, the underdevelopment, the extremism and terrorism which we have been facing for over 1 decade now, or 2 or 3 decades, were a product of abject neglect by successive leaders who come from our own part of the country. If you're going to share this blame, I can say that at least Tinubu should take 10% of it. But the bulk of it has to do with leadership that failed to use the opportunity of power to utilize the resources of the region for the benefit of the people of the region. Look at it. The statistics on the number of out-of-school children, the mortality rate, maternal mortality rate, the poverty index, the economic indices have all seen how the North has not just lagged behind, but continuing to lag behind in comparative to what is happening in the southern part of Nigeria. But I have said it continuously that poverty is not an excuse to violence. The people of the North are not poorer than the people of Niger Republic. They're not poorer than the people of Benin Republic. They're not poorer than people of Chad and northern Cameroon. But poverty was used now as a basis to instigate violence. Now, it is incumbent on the leaders of the North to take lessons from what has happened and to also know the consequences and dangers of doing nothing. They need to come back to drawing board. The governors, political leaders, religious, business, the intellectuals of the region need to converge and address the fundamental issues of poverty and underdevelopment in the region so that this will come to an end.
Senator.
It has been said.
Yeah.
Sometimes the bandits who are killing and kidnapping people are not from Cameroon, they are not from Niger, they are not from Morocco. They are people from the North. The terrorists who are killing people in the Northeast are people from the North. So the problems of the North can largely be solved by people from the North. If a Northerner was in power, when a Northerner was in power for 8 years, and you are patient enough with him, you refuse to hold him to account, and he failed to deliver, there is no better way other than to see that those who come from the North and are still within this government will be able to deliver what we failed to deliver to ourselves when we were in power. So I believe this is what needs to be done.
Senator, as a way to wrap up the conversation, there are those who now think that we need to now hold more firmly those who are in government or those who are the leaders or elected leaders to account on the promises. And not only at the center, because you can only control one unit, but at the states, you control different units. How do citizens then start doing this? Because the microscope needs to now be thinner because you're now not looking at the national, you're looking at the different units. How do we hold the states? And you, Mr. Falan and I were discussing the humongous amount of money that now go to the federating units.
You see, since the blame game started in the last few weeks, the federal government has been coming up with statistics of money that has been disbursed to the states, and with the Supreme Court rulings that freed the local governments from the stranglehold and asphyxiation by the states. It's clear that if the resources that have been allocated to the states will go down to the people, the issue of poverty can rightly be addressed. But it is also for the people to hold those at the state and local government to account. If we concentrate on what is happening at the federal level, we will naturally miss it. And you can even read it on social media. You hardly see people posting about what is happening in their state assemblies, their local governments, and their states. They concentrate on what is happening at the national level. And that is not in the best interest of our country. We can't address the problems of poverty if resources doesn't go to the grassroots, to the communities, and to the people on the lower strata of the society.
All right.
Yes.
Senator Shehu Sani, a former federal lawmaker, and he's told us that he has not retired as a right activist, but indeed, more voices need to be joined with people like yours to strengthen the ties that bind us together as a people, and of course, move forward the vehicle of governance so that it can reach every single citizen in this country. Thank you so much indeed for your time today, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
But that's our show for today, everyone. Don't forget that the task of moving this country forward is for all of us, wherever you may be, private, public sector, even in the media. We have a role and a duty to first keep our country together, then move our country forward. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. God bless you.